Okay, so Rain, thank you for the reminder. For those of you who are still with us on this recording, just so that you are aware, the previous one cut out because I'm based in South Africa and we sometimes get what's known as load shedding here, also known as road blackouts in the rest of the world. The schedule was completely incorrect. So I thought I did not have a blackout that day, only to find out that nope, we do. So unfortunately, he got cut off right as we were getting to the juicy stuff. Wouldn't you agree, Rain?
I would agree, yes.
Great. So, okay, I think where we ended off, you were saying was we were talking about taking mindfulness to a higher and whole new level, where you're actually able to use your movement, so what is the term you use, somatic,
Somatic. So, somatic is of the body, right? So, movement in general.
to really connect with what is going on so that you can let that energy flow through you more easily if you are
Hmm.
in a down space as
Yeah, right? Just think of, when we're in that low space or down space or energy or vibration, whatever label you want to put on
Mhm.
it, is at a lower functioning level. And so then what happens is our mind kind of goes into this psychotic spiraling, right? And we
Right.
we go into worryville, and then our emotions get pulled into it, and so now we're completely off track, right off the rails. And you and I have been through those experiences, as well as probably many of our listeners. So then it's really challenging to try and get our mind space back on track.
Mm.
So, it's with movement, whether we're doing yoga or we're doing the dishes, it's with some kind of methodical movement that now our energy is being expelled, through our body system, and our mind can settle, it can
Right.
relax, we can breathe, and our emotions then follow that route. So it just
For
makes it
sure.
easier for us. And
Yeah.
then, that's where that whole, how I talk about consciousness, that's where that whole tapping in pops in. Because
Mm.
then now our spirit can commune with God's source, and we can figure
Right.
things out, and we can understand, and we can grow in that, thought, like positive thoughts, and inviting synchronicity in.
And it's so interesting that you related that to connecting with God's source as well, because in Eastern mysticism, we know that the reason that the monks practice yoga or qigong or tai chi is because they understand, or they understood and still understand, that it's very much a holistic practice. Your
Hmm.
mind, body, and soul are not separate. Yes, they are different parts of you, but they are completely interconnected.
That's
And if
right.
you're holding tension in your body, it's more difficult to release tension in your spirit.
Hmm.
So that somatic response, the movement to get the energy moving in your body has an automatic effect on your mental state, on your emotional state,
Absolutely.
on your soul state, for sure.
Yep, they all affect each other. There's, we can't, I've always said, if, say, we're ever in a car accident, yes, of course, our physical body is impacted first.
Hmm.
But then, there's a recovery period. So during that recovery period, we may not be working, or we may not be able to function in our regular, daily routine. So, our mental state is affected, and our emotions are affected. So you're right. It's all interconnected, for sure.
Absolutely. So, just for our listeners to understand as well, there's actually about, what is it now, 4 days between the two halves of this episode. And in the previous half of this episode that you're listening to, I mentioned that I was actually going through quite a lot of um, personal depression and just not being able to break free from that.
Hmm.
But I managed to spend some time doing exactly what Rain recommended. And I upped the ante a little bit. And actually, on Sunday, I did one of my favorite things, which is go for a walk in the mountainside, through the forests.
Mm.
And I mean, you know this, that forests and oceans have a lot of negative ions,
Oh,
which is
yes.
incredibly soothing for the body.
Hmm.
And it was really good. And I went with a friend of mine who's, phenomenal when it comes to his understanding of philosophy and also just making the mind think a little bit.
Hmm.
And I got to discuss a few things with him and actually relating to not only my depression, but also this podcast episode. And one of the things that came out on our walk was he said to me, but Stefan, are you respecting yourself? You're having this discussion about mastering your new earth hero or heroine inside of you. Are you respecting that hero? And I went, that's really interesting. And something that I then actually had a discussion with one of my clients about. I said, I took that thought a little bit further and I said, when you have someone that you look up to, that you put on a pedestal, and yes, I know we're not supposed to put humans on a pedestal, but we do anyway. So it's gonna happen. When we do that, we show that person a certain level of respect.
Yeah.
And as a result, we would not do anything intentionally to harm or do them in.
Absolutely. We would treat them with such care and we would cherish them.
Right.
I mean, you take any, like, look across the world, any problems that people will come forward with. So relationship issues, work ethics in the workplace, like, as far as respecting each other and treating each other with care, in our family systems, among our friendships, all of it. Boundaries get crossed sometimes. And so we
Mm,
really have to work through those processes. And like you say, just bring it back. None of us is perfect. We all fall off that beaten path. But when that happens, instead of us, because this is what society teaches us, is like, feel guilty and just judgment and all those sorts of things. So instead of
right.
going that way, we want to look at the situation, such as you did yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and possibly, have a chat with a friend or a colleague, or if we have a support system in place with a counselor, whoever it is we talk to, and work through it. So bring it back to a more productive space in, like you say, respecting yourself, cherishing yourself,
Mm,
bringing it back to that foundation that can actually grow and nurture when you water it, just like you would a plant, right?
absolutely. And I want to say something because I sense that probably some of our listeners will be thinking to themselves, oh, but, isn't that selfish? Or won't I get a really big head if I do that? But I think it requires a certain intense level of self honesty and self examination
Yes.
because there's a difference between respecting your inner hero and going, what am I worth? And what am I willing to not settle for? What is
Yes.
sort of my level? And you have to be honest with yourself. Like if you, for instance, I am not an artist. I cannot draw to save my life. Okay? Hand me a piece of clay, I can sculpt you pretty much anything. But in art class in
Nice.
school, I was just, I mean, the art teacher would kind of look at me and go, oh, maybe you should stick to accounting, Stefan. I don't think this is quite your forte.
Right.
um, and therefore, that kind of, I use that as a hyperbolic example, but I would not then go out and say, oh, well, I'm going to paint something and I want people to pay me $3 million for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not what we mean by respecting your inner hero or putting that self forward. You have to be honest with what are my skill sets, who am I as a person, and what am I willing to accept for that, and what am I not willing to accept. What
And
is yeah, sorry.
Well, and part of that story is that's only half the story. So
Yeah,
your example, you didn't know whether you were an artist or not until you tried, until you made that attempt. So
right.
in that moment, you only had half the story. So sometimes then, like you say, it takes us to explore what are our skill sets? What can we do? Sometimes we can learn something, learn
Mm,
a new skill and we can just run with it. Like, I mean, my first experience painting, I was in a recovery type program with women, and we had an artist come in and do a paint class with us, and I painted a picture, and the woman that ran the group came over and said, "Have you painted before?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Oh my goodness, for your first painting, that's amazing." So, I wouldn't have known had I
right,
not had that experience. So, up until that point, in both our examples, we only had half the story. So, we need to allow ourselves the freedom to go out and explore and discover who we are. Like you say, just be honest with yourself, but also be willing to discover who you possibly are and who you are becoming. And then now you can make a more neutral assessment. Okay, maybe I'm not such a great artist, so maybe I'm really good with numbers. You know,
right.
these are these are important things in our lives so that we choose wisely. And you mentioned wisdom in our last podcast. um, it's all about being conscientious, really being conscientious with your thought that brings you into this wisdom of, okay, this is what I can do and this is what I'm possibly able to do, and this is what I won't do because it's just
Right.
not me, right?
I love that you bring up that aspect of trying new things because that to me really requires us to embrace that inner hero. Because heroes are brave, right?
Hmm.
The
Yep.
hero is the one that's willing to take the risk, the one that's willing to go out on a limb and try new things or try a
Yes.
new approach to get the job done. And you're absolutely right. It's the other half of that spectrum. It's not just respecting our hero and giving it what it deserves. It's also embracing it and embracing that level of bravery that we all have inside us to try new things without expectation or judgment. Because you're not going
Hmm.
to be good at everything that you try your hand at right off the
Right.
bat. Okay?
Yeah, that would be a very narcissistic approach, right?
Absolutely.
So
So
we want
you
to
have,
look at, well,
yeah,
we want to look at what, like you say, what we're good at, and then we can walk in leadership on
absolutely.
that path.
And by the same token, if there's something that we're not good at, but that we really enjoy doing, um, then be willing to eat humble pie for a little while
Yes,
whilst you're
true.
learning to be good at it. Because, and I use this example a lot when some of my friends who don't understand intuition or who don't understand how it is that I'm able to do certain things, and they go, "Is it a gift that you are born with and that other people are just not?" And I always use the example of 100-meter sprint. And I say, would you assume that certain people are genetically, physically gifted and able to run 100-meter sprints faster than most people? And the answer, of
Hmm.
course, is yes, absolutely. There are people out there who,
That's an excellent example.
right, there are people out there, Hussein Bolts, they're going to be incredible at a sprint. Okay, they're genetically gifted. They have to train hard to stay that way and stay at the top,
Right.
but they are genetically gifted. And I go, but does that mean that the average person off the street cannot learn to run 100-meter sprint in a competitive time? Well, no, absolutely. If they work hard, no matter how
That's right.
genetically ungifted they are in that respect,
Hmm.
barring any form of disability, they could
Well, and
absolutely do that.
it's not just about the win. It's about, think of if you're training to be a sprinter. You're literally in training, so you're preparing your body, you're exercising, you're out running. It's teaching you fortitude, it's teaching you determination. You may be eating healthier because you're wanting to be in the best shape that you can. So all of those gains, like, it's just like I was going to say earlier, what we're doing when we only have half the story is we're gathering little bits of information. And so, just like if you were training to be a sprinter, you're
Mm-hmm.
slowly bringing in little bits of more and more information to help you move towards that goal, right?
And oh my goodness, Rain, you've literally brought us full circle, because I think right there you've encapsulated what it is to master your inner new earth hero or heroine. Because it's all those aspects. It's taking in little bits of information so that you can be a better person,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can take those risks, so that you can recognize your own limitations, which, and I love this, my father always used to say, humility is not self effacement. Humility is responding to and recognizing your personal limitations.
Mm, yeah.
And I never quite understood what that meant as a child. But now, as I'm growing older, I'm realizing, yes, that is actually what humility is. It's not about it's not false humility, because false humility is where you have that idea of someone who's, is the word obsequious? I think so. The person who's kind of constantly deferring and constantly being like, no, no, you decide. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
decide. I'm humble. I'm not going to make that choice.
Right.
That's
Right.
not humility. Humility is, I'm going to defer to you because I recognize that you are better at XYZ than me.
Right, that's true. And I think, this is where sometimes religion can do a disservice for us, because,
Mm,
like, when I hear that word humility, right away my brain goes to this visual of someone like on their knees,
mm,
being humble, right? And that's part of it, but that's not the full comprehensive picture of it. The way you described it is really what we should be aiming for. That's where
uh,
we're going. We want to be strong, and we want to walk, as a thought leader in leadership, but also that does require a certain amount of humility.
mm,
Because again, it goes back to the worldly perspective, and that's always about judgment, and it's always
right.
about blame, and you know there's little forgiveness, or what would you call it, like leeway, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
There's little of that, and so humility brings us back to where it could be, you know.
And it requires a huge level and a deep level of honesty with ourselves.
Yes, yes.
And I, I bring that up specifically because if you have true humility from a wealth of honesty, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm formulating this thought as I'm speaking, but it would then mean that external judgment would not affect you as much because you're able to be open and honest with yourself. So if somebody says something or judges you on something that is untrue, you're able to go, well, that's simply not true. So that means it's got nothing to actually do with me. It's a projection. If there is some truth to it, because you've done those exercises in mastering your inner heroine or hero, you are then able to go, actually, that is true. I'm going to be humble and accept that as counsel to help me be better, constructive criticism.
Exactly. Yeah. I just had an experience happen in the last day or two, and like, I can't remember what it was right now. It was something very simple.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember that, and I caught myself. So my brain was going in a certain direction of thought, and all of a sudden, I I caught myself and I said, no, you know what? You need to look at this a little bit differently. And I literally flipped that thought, within 30 seconds. And the result was, I mean, obviously I remember the lesson. I don't remember the situation, but the result was that it was a much better thought choice. And I know it involves someone else, so it had something to do with, you know, giving them
Mm-hmm.
something to that effect. But anyway, this is all about, basically what we're talking about is all going in the direction of where humanity is going now.
Mm.
The way that you encapsulated that, this is exactly where we're going. We're moving from this like thick, heavy, stuck, 3D environment that we live in, and we're moving into that awareness. And we're
Yes.
becoming awakened into the consciousness. See, it always comes back to that for me, because you talk about, then we're looking at it differently. We're accessing humility, and we're looking at it in a productive way. And
Mm.
so, that could be, we may be the little engine that could that day. There might be something that, or a situation we're going through, and we're just, inching our way up that incline. But it also could be something more impactful, as like, just like, when we're sprinting, like you say, running that race, we're in that determination mode in the moment now, energized and running forward, right? So see the difference there. The variation
Yes.
is different, but we are heading towards the same goal,
Mm.
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I like the fact that you bring that up because that's then, I think, very much the first part of our title, The New Earth, because we're looking at it from the perspective of where is the planet going? Where is
Mm-hmm.
society going? This evolutionary path that we are on is now no longer a physical one, it's
Mm-hmm.
a spiritual, emotional, mental one.
Exactly, and it's all interconnected. I mean,
Yeah.
everything that we're experiencing, we're actually living in the, like, moving forward in the consciousness, but living that hero or heroine within. And
Mm.
by doing so, we are actively creating the shift across the earth and in our world, and
Mm.
Lord knows, going into new worlds, right? Of that
Right.
fifth dimension, you know. And so it is all interconnected. That's what it's teaching us, is unity. Unity with one another, unity, consciousness across our earth, so that the vibratory levels will no longer support or what would the word be, admonish, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
or give permission to dark uh, entities disrupting the earth and the agendas in that darkness, the evil things that go on that we don't see, out in plain sight. So again, that even ties into your comments about, be honest with yourself. You know, what are you willing to allow, not only in
Yes.
your life, but going outwards into the community and across our globe as a whole, you know?
And that is, I think, something that everybody does need to ask because you said two things there that really resonated with me. One is that you have to ask, what are you willing to accept for yourself going out into this world, into this new world that we're creating? And then earlier on, you also said we have to remember that what we do resonates out into society in general, and we're
Yeah.
creating change just by existing.
Yes.
And that is why, I mean, this is something we've brought up in a couple of our other episodes as well. All these light workers and shadow workers that are working, maybe not together, we are all creating new vibratory patterns that are impacting the people around us.
Yes. Well,
So,
there. we're
Yeah.
impacting the people around us, but we have to also, be cognizant of the fact that there are other realms, angels,
Mm.
and, guides, people even that have crossed over, that we loved.
Yep.
It affects all. We're all interconnected, and I think that goes back to when we were talking about the matrix. Remember when we had that conversation about,
Yes.
the matrix being something that is far extensive, extending into the universal realms, which encompasses all, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we can look at it again at this close, personal, up and close personal level, but we can also look at it at a much more
A, a
expansive,
broader, yeah.
yeah, broader perspective, a
Mm.
macro level for sure. Macro earthly, but macro universal as well, because it all comes together. And isn't this exciting that we're actually in the middle of creation by creating this?
That is both exciting and incredibly scary. It seems like a huge amount of responsibility, but I think we've got this, definitely.
Yeah, we're
So,
doing it.
okay, Rain, what I'd love to ask you as we start to wrap up this podcast, if you had to, in just a few short sentences, give our listeners some, I guess, tips, tricks, guidelines as to, from your perspective, how one can master their new earth heroine or hero in themselves, what would you say?
Okay, well, one would be definitely to do your best to access being centered and to stay
Mm-hmm.
centered, right? So, when you're standing there, just, you put your hands on your gut just above your belly button, and you want to connect. You want to stay connected as much and as often as you can. So being mindful, being conscientious, tapping in to your truth so that you can guide your life daily and moment to moment in a much more productive but also at ease state, so that when you are moving forward in experiences, or you're required to make a decision, whether it be to purchase something or to help a friend or to take this route instead of that route, it doesn't matter what the decision is,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to make that best decision for yourself in that moment, right?
Love that.
Secondly, stay proactive. Stay proactive in your life. So that means, being being motivated, being in movement, um, moving forward, whether it be through, exercise, yoga, like qigong. Like, I love qigong. You mentioned
Oh,
that, I
it's
was just
beautiful.
so
Yeah.
excited.
We might have
But
to do a whole episode on that.
we might have to, and just, staying proactive in what you do. Keep
Mm.
that consistency and that movement going. So, for example, for a lot of listeners that are, which a lot of us are working from home now, it is so easy to just be sitting at your computer hour after hour. Take the time to block in, um, getting up and going outside,
Mm.
walking on the grass with your bare feet, and just, um, staying active in movement. Go for a walk, go for a drive, go run an errand, just to kind of shift and change that, sitting there, because
Right.
it's not productive. And then the
Absolutely.
third thing, I didn't think I was going to have three, but see, there we go.
There we
Um,
go.
the third one would be, of course, to bring in that grounding piece. Like I said,
Mm.
it is so important to go out and just look up into the sky and just take some moments to breathe, to exhale, right? Because especially if we're online a lot now, we're just pummeling information in, information in, information in. We need that time to exhale. So, do go outside and, feel. feel the grass on your feet, or if you're close to water, you can maybe go for a walk along the beach. Something that grounds you, because they've even done studies where when people have experienced jet lag,
Yeah.
if they when they return home, if they just take their shoes off and they walk on the grass in their bare feet, or on the earth, it actually recalibrates the jet lag.
Ah.
So, it's very healing for us. It's therapeutic. And there are even studies out now that that type of approach has actually helped people to heal long-term illnesses. It's just phenomenal. Women were found
Cognition.
to be losing weight, and like, it's just crazy how effective it is. I mean, just think of yourself in the times. Well, you just went for your hike on the weekend, and
Yeah.
being in the mountains and smelling the fresh air and the trees and the leaves, and just you know
Mm.
even going for a walk along the water, or just standing there and just watching the beauty of a lake or an ocean, or even a stream, even a little stream. I remember, when I was a teenager, I would go for this walk. We had a little tiny stream just down the road, and I would just sit there and it would ground me. I would
Yeah.
just sit there and think and not think, and it was just so healing. So those would be my three. What would you say? What would you recommend?
So before I get to my three, because you've just said something really interesting there, and I want to share just a little anecdotal story. I have a friend who I think she's in her late 40s. I hope I've gotten that right and I haven't gotten her age wrong, because that's not a topic one
For
talks
women.
about. Yeah.
Yeah.
But she was telling me because her grandmother was quite at the time, I suppose, spiritualist was the
Hmm.
term that was used.
Yes.
Um, and when they would throw tantrums as toddlers, their punishment, quote unquote, was to go outside. They had to take off their shoes, and she would insist that they would literally have to ground themselves. They'd have to put their feet in the
Mm,
soil and their hands. So they'd get down on their hands and knees, feet and
wonderful.
hands in the soil for 5 minutes. And she says, without fail, whatever the tantrum was about, they would be perfectly fine after 5 minutes.
Oh
And the
my
grandmother
goodness.
would literally just say, the earth has a way of balancing out your emotions. And
That is
now,
just amazing, right?
right? And now we know that that's actually what is that is actually what's happening. The earth balances you out. It recalibrates you.
Mm. Talk
So
about
yeah,
a shift. Talk about a
exactly.
shift from a guilt and blame and judgment space to freedom. That's just
Exactly,
amazing.
exactly. So my three would be definitely respect for your inner hero, practicing self-respect. Sorry, no, not practicing self-respect. I want to make a differentiation there, because when we say practice self-respect, that can be difficult for a lot of people because we are externally biased. We don't like doing stuff for ourselves. But if you actually create an inner persona that is your hero and you practice respect for that inner hero, it can sometimes be easier than trying to say, well, I'm going to respect myself.
Absolutely.
That would be number one. Number two would be practicing bravery in terms of trying new things without self judgment. So give yourself permission to fail and laugh at it and be like, well, I tried it. It was great. It was fun. It didn't work out, but at least I tried.
That's
So
right.
taking that expectation out of new experiences. And then lastly would be radical self honesty, which is going to be really difficult because I think for myself as well, there's some things where you think you're a lot better at than you actually are, and some
Right.
things that you think you're just awful at, but you're actually not bad. And it takes some real doing and a lot of self work to go, well, where is that differentiation? And that's what I mean by radical honesty in order to support and master that inner hero or heroine.
Yes, and I think, overall, what we're saying too is don't be afraid of failure, and also
Mhm.
not just don't be afraid of it. I mean, that requires a certain amount of confidence and bravery
Mm,
and whatever, possibly, like excitement or inquisitiveness to try something new, but looking at it rather like I'm just having this new experience and not judging it.
yes,
So,
exactly.
just moving forward in it and not judging it if it works or it doesn't work. I mean, a true analytical mind would say, "Oh no, you can't do that. You have to have the facts and you have to have the numbers and all that sort of thing." And that's fine. We do want to look at things, in a realistic, um, look at things in a realistic way. We want to be able to gather that information so that we have, the facts to weigh. But also at the same time, we want to be able to jump into that energy of freedom and
Mm,
freeness, right? And just not judge the experience, just do it. When you watch
absolutely.
a little kid, it's raining out and they've got their rain boots and their raincoat on, and you're walking along with them, and then they see a puddle. They don't think like, oh gee, the circumference of the puddle, if I just,
Right.
they just like jump, they just go for it, they jump right in, and they don't, it
Mm-hmm.
splashes all over the place, maybe they fall, and then maybe they're crying, who knows, but they're not afraid
Right.
to try something new, right? So we
Absolutely.
want to we want to embody that mental state and that emotion space, and like you're saying, honor it.
For sure.
That's what it comes to. And then that's how we create that hero or that heroine within, because now we are living the life experience. So
Absolutely.
those are my final thoughts.
What a wonderful way to wrap this session. Rain, as always, awesome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day, out of your morning for this. And to our listeners, this has been Unprecedented with Rain and Stefan. We'll see you next time.